Hello to everyone watching. My name is Ronnie, and these are my two lovely guests who will introduce themselves in a sec. And we'll be running a panel about tabletop gaming and how it improves your mental health. So I am Ronnie. This is my first time chairing a panel. I use they, she pronouns, and please be kind to me in the comments. So handing over to my guests.
Hi, I'm Maya. Pronouns are undecided and destroy me in the comments.
Hi, my name is Johnny. I work as head of video for dicebreaker.com. I use he, him pronouns, and I barely even read the comments these days.
Awesome. So, as mentioned, we're going to be running a panel about how tabletop gaming impacts mental health. I know it's not a particularly common topic to talk about, but this idea came to me a few months ago when I was really depressed, and the only thing that got me out of bed was my local university tabletop club. And so the way I want to kick this panel off is, this is including the viewers, so if everyone could share some memories that they have that particularly stand out of tabletop gaming and how you think it impacted your mental health at that time.
Okay, do you want to start, or?
Sure. I'll go for it. I guess I started really getting into tabletop games when I was sort of in my early 20s, and funnily enough, I was actually really quite profoundly depressed. I had gone through a bad breakup from like a not nice relationship that I was in, and it had really taken my confidence had taken a knock. I was profoundly depressed. I'd just been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I kind of felt really listless. And a friend of mine kind of gave me a nudge to join his role-playing group because somebody had just left. They had an opening, and they were like, "Why don't you come try this? We'll be talking in silly voices and pretending we're cowboys for an evening." And it was really intimidating because it was a bunch of people I didn't know, and the idea of putting myself out there and like talking in a weird voice and trying to improvise this story with other people was really, really like an alien concept. And I really didn't want to do it, but I dragged myself into it, and it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. Like, it was great fun. I made some really good friends, and I'm still playing with them to this day. And yeah, I can't really imagine the impact. I can't really quantify, rather, the impact it's had on my mental health. Like, it's nice, and it's given me a new career, which is weird. So, big up tabletop role-playing games, I guess.
I similarly found like tabletop game when I got sort of really big into it. Like, I've always liked board games and have been into it, but I think the time that it massively had an effect on me is so 2 years ago my body just gave up on me, and I now am a wheelchair user, and it was through I have fibromyalgia and Ehlers-Danlos, which are two chronic pain conditions, and fibromyalgia is massively driven by your mental health, and my mental health is a mess, and now my body is too. So we're just filling in the gaps. And Veronica was one of the only people who actually kept in contact with me and came to see me when I got really sick. And she was massively into like D&D and things, and she proposed it to me, and she was kind of very scared because I think she was like, "Oh no, I've got this D&D thing which is quite nerdy. I don't know how Maya's going to react to it." And then I was like, "Hell yeah, I'm so up for that. I have no friends, so this is going to be something to fill my time with." And it became such like a positive thing because I was able to get into like the creative side of it, and it got me into like writing again and sort of doing art when I was too depressed to do it. And it also then gave me an excuse to kind of do things and get my friends together. And I found obviously like Ox Venture and people like Dingo Doodles who do like very cool D&D, like animated things, because I'm into animation. And again, like you said, it's had just this massive positive effect on my mental health when I was in a time where I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to recover from my illness. Like, it's kind of like you get these things for life. And I was like, I could get so much worse. And I think Veronica and tabletop gaming kind of delayed that decline, which, so yeah, again, like I cannot thank tabletop gaming enough in a way for what it's done for me in my life.
Yeah, and I think, again, similarly, I got into tabletop gaming in a very bad place in my life. I got into it a bit earlier than in my 20s. I'm 20 now, for people who want to know. I was about 17 and I became hospitalized because of my mental health. And we didn't have a lot to do in hospital, I have to be honest. Most of it is just sitting around waiting for therapy or getting screamed at by nurses. And one of the things that really stuck with me was the occupational therapist made a point of whenever I didn't leave my room, they would sit in the corridor with me and they would bring a board game. And they would just sit there and I would be sitting in my room and they would be in the corridor and we'd play Scrabble or we'd play Risk. And in a way that really got me interested in the hobby. And then one day, one of the occupational therapists bought a box of Tyranids and I was like, what the hell is that? That looks awesome. And he was like, yeah, you know what? Have a go at painting those. And that's how I got stuck with a hobby that's cost me hundreds of pounds. And I can't explain in words how it helped me develop my social skills, because I was incredibly socially anxious, and it made me reach out to people and be like, hey, do you actually want to start a game together? And I joined a tabletop cafe where I was like, hey, can I try out some new games? And it's helped me grow as a person so much more than I ever thought it could. But I hope that a lot of people have found that that's been the experience for them too, where they managed to find this hobby maybe not a great place, but it's helped them to grow a bit. And if you do have any experiences like that, leave them in the comments. Like, I would love to hear it. And I noticed that we all mentioned RPGs. Well, Maya mentioned me in her story about RPGs, so you know I'm into them. But I think RPGs particularly have a lot of meat in helping people improve their mental health. And I was wondering what particular features give people that freedom and that opportunity to work on their mental health.
Go for it.
So I think because it creates, it's all about safe spaces. And I think when you're mentally ill, the world feels like a massively, massively unsafe place. And especially being like, and as well being like physically disabled, because it feels like the world's against you, because at times it really is, like in healthcare and the media and just people that you have to be around. And it creates this safe little bubble, if you're with the right people, that you can be honest and you can be open. And I know that like it's role playing, but a lot of people project the things that they struggle with onto their character or into the campaign. And I think it presents a healthy way for people to work through some of this with a supportive group of people that could help them see some of their issues from a different angle, or present things that maybe you would have never thought about to like do. And so like if you've got your character and you're like, wow, okay, my character is like a severely depressed alcoholic, I'm totally not talking about myself. And then people along the way, you've got this crew of people who along the campaign will, like, if you're already friends in real life, or you might make them into friends, that go, well, maybe you could try not doing that or whatever to your character, and helping you find new coping mechanisms, because it won't benefit the campaign or your party. And then you can shift that over to real life. It's not always as simple as that, but it's a start. Yeah.
I think that really hits the nail on the head, because role-playing kind of gives you an opportunity to obviously practice being somebody outside of yourself, but also allows you to pick and choose what elements of yourself you do include, and kind of get feedback on them in almost in a hypothetical way. Because, you know, even if you're emulating parts of your personality you have, people respond to that character, and it gives you an external perspective you may not always get when you're interacting with people normally. But also that I find that character distance really, really useful, even if I'm not using a character to work something out. But it's just, sometimes it's incredibly refreshing to not be me for a few hours, but still be interacting with people. So, you know, it because when you're playing a game, whether it's an RPG, then it's especially pronounced. But even when it's, a board game, you've got something central, something central that everybody is focusing on, and you're trying to make happen together. So it's collaborative and it feels constructive, but also it means that there's less pressure on you specifically. It feels like fewer people are watching you or judging you. And that can be really freeing, especially if you're going through a period where you don't really feel like being yourself anyway. So I think that's why, even when I'm at my lowest ebb, I can generally find the enthusiasm to go play an RPG or play board games, or whatever, because just like you said, Myra, it's about creating safe spaces, and that's like where I feel safest, I think.
I think. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, like, the idea of a safe space, that is something that is so very pronounced in RPG games, not only because you're playing with people who you can feel safe, but the idea of having a facilitator. So a GM, for example, there is someone that is setting the boundaries and someone who's making sure that people feel safe. So it's a very controlled environment as well. So people can have that freedom, and if they're not feeling safe, they have someone that can manage that boundary for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and because the GM isn't on the side of anyone, they're on the side of the party and they're on the side of the campaign, and so it means that if two people aren't getting along, it's not about taking sides. It's just about like finding the most proactive and least destructive path. And like Johnny, you talked about distance, and that having that distance helps you. And I agree with that, because if you go to therapy to address your problems, then it's all eyes on you, and you're with this like person who's sitting there, and you're saying this stuff about you, and they're sitting there like this, and then you're meant to feel like there's not anything wrong with like that's highlighting the fact that there is something wrong with you. They're taking notes, and those notes will go somewhere, and someone else is going to find out. Like, it all feels like things are being conspired against you. Whereas in like you said about putting your some of your traits onto your character, it's then also not a personal attack against you. So like a therapist will be like, well, you probably shouldn't do that. That's really unhealthy. Why are you doing that? And sometimes can be very judgmental. And then in like a game setting, it's not about you, it's about your character. And then later on, you can reflect at home and be like, oh my God, they were right. But you don't have to do that at the time, and you're distracted, so you don't feel like you're being attacked. And yeah, I just think it can be for some people who aren't ready for something like therapy, because that's big and it's scary, but it's important. And yeah, I think it creates a smaller environment and a safer environment, like you said.
Yeah, and I think talking about RPGs and the link to therapy, tell me if what I'm about to describe sounds familiar. You select a problem that you want to solve, then you open your mind to all the possible solutions. You list the potential pros and cons, you verify the best solution, you enact the plan, and then you decide if the plan worked. Familiar?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is just how many goblins there are, real or imagined.
Yeah, exactly. So you would do that if you're a party and you're trying to work out kind of what's the best solution. But what I just described, that was a CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy acronym. And a lot of the time in therapy, you're given acronyms to remember skills, and a lot of the time, role-playing games especially, but tabletops in general, they normalize therapeutic skills. And what do you think about that statement?
I think I was just about to say, like, who snuck my camps worker in here, like, and I just think that doesn't surprise me at all, because it's about it's about being proactive, not letting your emotions rule the situation. You have to think about it from like how you get the best thing out of it. And I think it's, in some cases, again, for some people better, because when your CAMS worker is like, have all these ridiculous acronyms, and then you're sitting there having a panic attack and you're trying to remember like the 24 letters of the alphabet that like you're meant to go through, it doesn't really help. Whereas if you can practice it in that environment, then it gives a neutral place where you can practice these tactics and you don't have any real life consequence. so that when later on when you're like, you might be crying in your bathroom, you can just click into it automatically because you've practiced it enough that it doesn't become something you have to think about. And you know, therapists say that you have to practice it, but who's going to sit on their sofa at home rather than watching Netflix be like, I have to go through this and run through this when I'm not feeling good? It doesn't. There can be a disconnect there. Whereas if you're putting it in a fun setting where you enjoy it, that works a lot better for people because unknowingly you're being brainwashed. Like,
yeah, I have to say, like, I've been through CBT. I did a course of it when I was sort of first diagnosed, and I found it really, really helpful. And you totally got me then. Like, I'm surprised and delighted that that's what you were reading out, because you were like, you know, think of a plan, put that plan into action. I was like, yeah, classic role playing, yeah, absolutely. And then, oh right. I didn't realise it was just, you know, straight out of literally that playbook for CBT. It's great, and I think, you know, you're absolutely right in that gamifying. I hate that word, but it is apt. Like gamifying, like therapeutic processes. It really does help you put things into practice and then use them when actual real life things come up. Because, you know, as you say, it's really hard to remember an acronym, but if you can sit there and be upset and think, or what would my paladin do, or whatever, it's a lot easier to be like, well, they'd probably do this. And again, you know, you can realise what your paladin, or, you know, your whoever your character might be, what they might do, and you can also weed out the bits that you already know are problematic. Because like, half of my role playing characters, like, they'd probably get drunk. It's like, let's not do that. But what else would they do? So yeah.
More useful, what would Jesus do in that situation? What would Paladin do?
Yeah, because, you know, typically I think role-playing characters are like portrayed as more nuanced and problematic than Jesus. You know, they have struggles they have to overcome. They're not literal gods.
And I think that's a very good point. You get to connect to your characters in a very therapeutic way, and tabletop gaming is a lot more than just sitting around a table and then you step away from that completely once you're back to real life. It's something that stays with you and that you think about in your day-to-day life. And I was thinking, have you guys identified any more therapeutic skills across all tabletop games, not just RPGs? So I think I'm going to start on this one, where I give you guys a chance to think. Miniature painting. I paint a bunch of miniatures. I have a little guy sitting here that I am just working on now.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank you. I underpainted him as I'm trying it out and glazing. And I find that gives me the perfect opportunity to practice mindfulness. I'm the first one to say I hate mindfulness. I hate breathing exercises. They make me feel more anxious. I have a few anxiety disorders and I am constantly on edge, but having something that I enjoy and being able to sit down with some paints and think, okay, I need to control my breath so I know exactly where this brushstroke is going, and then I'm not focusing on anything else because it's such minute detail that is taking up all my attention. So I think that's something that I've identified in tabletop gaming.
I completely agree with that. I don't paint miniatures, but I do quite a bit of art. And how obviously you say that you're constantly on edge. Like for me, it's like I have just raging ADHD. So it's like if you haven't already told from this call. And so my brain is in my brain, it's one of those, those toy monkeys with the cymbals doing backflips with circus music going around, but also if you put a microphone in a child's birthday party, 8-year-olds, they're charged up with sugar, screaming, running around. That is just my my nice little brain palace I've got. And when I find it so hard to do mindfulness because I'm too aware of everything going on that I can't focus it in. And when I do art, you have to, with brushstrokes, and it's similar with archery as well, or shooting a gun, but please don't shoot a gun unless you need to. And you have to exhale in certain places while you're painting or while you're releasing an arrow or shooting a gun, because it's about slowing things down. And like you say, it gives you a focus on doing that when you don't have to just be like, I'm doing a mindfulness technique. You do it already.
I think for me, I mean, I actually I love painting. I do find that therapeutic. I'm working on a tank. But for me, I think the best thing I've sort of picked up from tabletop gaming is analysing where I'm at and what I need at that moment, like, or that evening. Because I have a group of friends, we meet up as regularly as possible to play board games. And it's just, it turns out it's how we all like to spend our time. So instead of just, say, going to a pub and just chatting, we will always play games or whatever. So when we meet up, the first thing we do is like say, what's everyone in the mood for? And the conversations are never like, let's play something set in space. It's like, it's to do with how intense the situation is going to be. So sometimes somebody will say like, oh, I'm not really in the mood for anything hyper competitive tonight. Or, you know, oh, can we play something, you know, a little lighter? Or even, you know, can we play something really hefty because I want to just really lose myself in it? You know, everyone is saying what sort of like what intensity and what mood of board game they want to play, but what they're really saying is like, this is where I am emotionally and mentally right now, and this is what I think I need in order to have a really nice time. Which, like, I hadn't really thought about it in terms of mental health, but when I eventually cottoned onto it, I just thought, like, I was really glad. It's really comforting to know that that's how we start our evenings, because obviously a lot of the time if you meet up with friends, you meet up at a party, or you go to a pub, or you go to a, you know, a sports game or whatever, there's an expectation that you will be a certain level of on. You will be upbeat, you'll be happy, you'll be chatty, you'll be excited, and that can be exhausting, but it can also just feel like you're spending a whole evening lying. So it's quite nice to walk in, sit down and go, I feel terrible and I'm quite angry. Can we play something relatively straightforward where we smash each other to bits? And that's, you know, it's lovely. It's like ordering off a menu, but it's for cathartic experiences.
I completely agree with that, because I think with, like, there's parallels with both mental and physical illness where people are just like, it feels like you're being cross-examined when people ask you about what's going on. And it's like, you do feel like you have to lie, because it's like, a lot of the time, like, for me, like, someone's be like, oh, how are you doing at the moment? I can't be like, well, last night I collapsed in the middle of the night. Everyone was asleep, and I had to, like, I was on the floor for half an hour to an hour. I couldn't move, and I just sobbed and hyperventilated until eventually, like, my body could support its own weight again. Like, that's a bit like, whoa, party killer. You can't, like, drop that in the middle of, like, you know, like a sesh, because it just ruins the vibe. Whereas, like, I feel like there's less, like, I do very much feel like I have to lie to a lot of people because I don't want to hurt their feelings, or I don't want them to worry about me. But, like, if you're all coming in and you're all being like, had a bit of a rough one, I just want to I just want to destroy some goblins, for example. Like, I want to absolutely go ham on them. Like, that's, then the group will be like, yeah, I hear that. I've had an awful week too. And, like, you channel it in a productive way rather than you being like, because I feel like if you drop that in a pub setting, it brings a downer on you and a downer on the people around you a lot of the time, and people go a bit like, oh, I don't know how to handle that, but you just shift it into something else. And I find that also with, like, role playing and, like, making a character, I find, like you say, because you apply certain things about yourself to it, or you might just find yourself along the way in your character, and then it's almost like you can be, like, viewing yourself from an outside setting in an outside world as well. So you suddenly just go, oh wait, that's me, and, like, I can like, if I can change things in this game that I don't like about my character, or, like, how they're living their life, or impacting other people, I can do, oh my god, like, penny drop, I can do that with myself. And it's a lot more difficult, but you'll get there eventually if you put the work in.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of what mental health is putting the work in, and it's the same with tabletop gaming. The more work you put into it, the more backstory you put into a character, the more it gives the DM to work with, and the more you get out of it. So that's it feels like a forced link, but I promise it's not. And we've mentioned D&D a few times. I think something that is important to bring up is that D&D has become very popular, and it's brought more people to tabletop gaming, but it's also created communities and shows. So it's created the Venture, for example, and the Venture has created a community around itself. And I was wondering how the fact that we have those communities now is impacting people's health, those very specific niche, nerdy communities.
I think go for it.
Sorry, I was just about to say, I think you should kick this one off.
I think if there's anything I think those communities have done is it's lowered the bar for people getting into games, which is really nice because, you know, pen and paper role-playing games can be intimidating. You know, like I found it terrifying when I first did it, and I still get nerves before the start of like a new campaign or whatever, and I've been doing these, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. But I think, you know, things like the Venture has brought people together, and a lot of people have said they've tried D&D or other games for the first time as a result, which is really, really gratifying. It's lovely to hear because they've kind of seen us having a nice time, and to be honest, not really sticking to the rules that closely, and they've thought, I can do that, and then they've gone and done it. But then there's a sort of knock-on effect where you see people in the comments being like, you know, I really enjoyed this, I'd love to try it myself, and other people respond and go, do it. And they give them resources, and they basically they share their own path into it, which, to be honest with you, is so much more valuable than it coming directly from us, because when we're playing it to a very specific set of guidelines. For example, you know, like we know that we have to play to a time limit every single time, and because we are, you know, playing for video, we don't want to get too bogged down in the rules. We want to keep things moving. We want it to be story first and just let people have fun kind of watching the dumb interactions between people, which is why we kind of run it with a loose hand on the tiller. But not everyone's going, not everyone's going to be doing that. Not everyone's going to be saying, all right, well, we'll record for 4 hours, but we'll trim it down to 3, or we really need to just bypass this next bit because otherwise we're going to be off stage late or whatever. So for people to say like, I watch these people too, I really like this thing now, but here's how it is for me, it's so much more valuable. And it's just like, it's just nice to see. It's nice to see kind of these things happening organically by themselves. Like, it really, really makes me happy. Even though I wish more people would try games that aren't D&D. But that's just a personal bugbear. But, you know.
Yeah.
I've been on the non-D&D crusade with Maya as well. I've been on it with all my friends. I bring in like a bunch of books and it's like, okay, you've seen D&D, but now look at these.
May I interest you in these wares?
And like, you know, Veronica knows that I'm not big on words all the time because I can't concentrate. And then she kind of comes in and she's like, wow, look at the pretty pictures, Maya. You want to play this, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, I do. You've got me. But I think the communities are important because I think pen and paper, like role-playing games or like tabletop games have kind of been like demonized in a way of like being this like awfully nerdy thing that it's just like the only people who play them are like stinky nerds who live in their mum's basement and like, you know, and live off Code Red Mountain Dew and Doritos. And like, it's not like that at all. And I think that like media representation in a lot of ways has been very like damaging to like the role-playing like, community because it's been like bad nerds like, and that's why like, you know, things like Venture open it up on like and loads of people being like, oh my god, I could do that as well, because it's not suddenly this like thing that's focused on maths and like, you know, and like rules and all of this. And I think, yeah, because in general spaces, like I think for a lot of people they discover like tabletop games in either like high school, college, or like uni. And then in a high school environment, like again, like being like a nerd isn't cool. And so you have to be that. And I'd feel like I couldn't say that I liked D&D because it's not cool when you sit there and it's like, what do you like? And you're there and you're like, I like the Kardashians and Sports Direct. Is that right? Like, I don't know.
Massive mugs of tea.
Yeah, and which is always a win. And I feel like you can go in and confidently be like, I like this game and I like this game, and I'm also I think it also um, links in with like cosplay communities, and like you can link into like programs that have been turned into like games. Like I recently found out, thank you Veronica, that there is like a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure RPG, and I am like, I'm ready like to play it. And I think yeah, it's about creating a safe space for all of this to go on in. And for me, like I basically had to like threaten all of my friends at knife point, because I was like, I want to play D&D on my birthday, and you're all helping me do it because I can't do it without you. And they were all, at the beginning, they were like, you want me to, sorry, I'm going to move this, like, you want me to, so you can see my eyebrow movements, so you want me to do this? Maya, are you on crack? Maybe is the answer. And then afterwards, they were like, oh my god, this was so fun. Like we went to the loading bar, and like we made like a whole event of it. And they were like, and now every time I speak to any of them, they're like, Maya, when are we gonna play it again? Like, can we play another game as well? Like I found this. And it's like, I think these spaces are important because it changes people's biases and things that, like, because people haven't even played these games, but they are like, no, they're nerdy and bad. And it's just about breaking this thing. Or there was like the whole like satanic panic thing about like people being like, oh, you're playing with magic and stuff like that, and like that's unchristian and that's bad, like you're gonna go to hell playing that. And that's no, you won't. Like, spoiler alert. And yeah, and it's about breaking those biases that people have. And that's why, like, you know, things, again, linking back to Oxventure, or like, for example, like Critical Role, which has had a massive effect on how people view these games. And it's very, very important, because these communities could be the thing that literally makes people play it. And like you said, people being like, oh, I can do this. And that's important, because otherwise people won't do it, and then they won't find something that's good for them, which may benefit their mental health, which also may make them find friends, which is also important, and learn things about themselves and like what they want to do. So it like stops that link from being severed for a lot of people.
Yeah, and especially with creating friends, I found that having this already established community, it allows people to join and find people that they might not have found otherwise. So someone that might already be interested in tabletop role-playing games, they found this community and they think, oh, cool, I might finally find someone to play with. Or they might get introduced to other aspects of the hobby that they haven't thought of before. So I know a lot of the people, they got introduced to miniatures via D&D, or they got introduced to other role-playing games. So I always use D&D as the gateway, and then eventually I slowly build it up to play other games. And I think being able to have that variety of hobbies, that in and of itself is something that's good, because you're finding things to get you out of bed. You find it's almost back to therapeutic skills. It's like behavioral, what's the term? Behavioral activation, that's it. You're scheduling in fun things to help you get out of that initial funk. And I think I want the community to be able to take something away from this. And what would you guys say is a good way for people to find a game that is specifically helpful for them, or that they will particularly enjoy?
So this is the thing about working for a board games website, is we spend so much time every week talking about gateway games and just the best games to get people into the hobby. So, you know, like a lot of the easy ones are like Carcassonne or Catan or Pandemic. And, you know, like, those games are great for getting people into the hobby. A lot of people will have played Pandemic and then gone, oh, board games can be more than Monopoly or Scrabble or whatever. But the thing is finding new and exciting ones that are even better to get people in with. You know, stuff like, there's a game coming out very, very soon called Fort, which you are playing as a group of kids who are trying to build the best fort possible. And you do this by playing with friends and doing actions. And there are two currencies, which are toys and pizza. And the theme is so perfect that it hides the fact that it's a fairly crunchy deck builder that's got a really deep strategy to it. So I think in terms of finding games that sort of can help people get into the hobby, as a particular example, like that's always changing for me, and I'm always looking for that thing to spoon feed people. But I think in terms of if I were to try and pick a game or like a type of game that I would recommend to people as definitely more like prominently proactive or helpful, it would be co-op games. Those come with their own set of like pitfalls, because sometimes one person can get too bossy and just tell everyone what go they should be doing, and that can be a bad experience for people. It's referred to as table captaining, I think. But when you've got a nice group and you are playing a co-op game and you're getting it right and you're sort of doing it together, the moments of celebration that you get are amazing. There's a game called The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9, and all you're doing is trying to play the right cards in the right order without talking to one another. But you're also astronauts in space trying to find this rumoured ninth planet beyond Pluto for humans to inhabit. And when you get the missions right, everyone just goes ballistic, and it's wonderful. And I just think co-op games provide such a wonderful, like, positive experience for people without being cheesy, and I think that's quite rare. It's, I think the older you get, the harder it is to get a group of people together who all have the same goals, likes, drives, and desires. So for everyone to sit around and be like, okay, like, we're all very different people, but for the next 2 hours we're going to pretend to really give a damn about this island or whatever. It's just nice. I really love co-op games for that, I think.
Yeah, I think co-op games are also brilliant because, again, it's like building on those helpful tactics that can be applicable in like other real life situations. So like obviously like teamwork, working to like a compromise, not letting your emotions run like rampant, and like doing things as a team. And so I think, like you said, it's brilliant to have those as like a little segue. But I also think like a good way of getting into it is because it's a bit like anime. Whether people like it or not, there is an anime out there for everyone. And that is the same with role-playing games, because they're on so many different topics that like begrudgingly you will find one you like. And so I think the thing you have to do is go, well, what avenue would I rather go in? Would I rather do like pen and paper? Do I want pen and paper with like set? Or do I want to like go the miniatures route? And then I think if you pick a combination of all of these, if you find the avenue, and then I think if you just go, well, I like space, or I like, like fantasy, I like this, and then you can just find one that, that is in that little genre, and you can play it, and then you play it, and whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter, because then you go, okay, well, I enjoyed this, so I can play more games like this, or I didn't enjoy this, so I can avoid games that have these things in it. So yeah, I think that's like, because for example, for me, one of them, like a game that I've discovered recently is called Villainous, and it's where you're, for like people who don't know, it's you play a Disney villain, and you have to progress along your own little board, and complete your task before the other villains around you complete theirs. And it's really good, and it's really strategic, because you're trying to win but also trip everyone else up, and also without them knowing, if you're really good at it. And I think like it's been a good thing to get, like, it's helped me like spend more time with my family, because we can't always spend more like time together, and I think it's just, like, that's like a very big thing. Loads of people love Disney. Like, if you like Disney, play the game. Like, there should be a link up here. I'm joking. But yeah, like, I think it's just about finding what speaks to you, and then just, looking for it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because the last thing I want to do is force people to play tabletop games, because that is against the message of what the panel is trying to say. I think it's more along the lines of, this is a tool that you can potentially use, and it could be beneficial, and you should give it a go. And that's more the message I'm trying to send out. But on the topic of not trying to force things, when would be a good idea to take a break from a tabletop game? Because we've been talking loads about actually playing the games, but actually, too much of anything isn't great. So what are the signs people should look out for, whether they should just take a breather?
I think that like when it becomes like obsessive, and like I think it's very hard for people to determine when it becomes obsessive. So see point B, when it becomes obsessive, it interrupts like just basic things that you should be doing. So if you're sitting there cramped over your miniature, you're ignoring the fact that your back feels like it's on fire, and you haven't showered like in a few days because you've just been painting, you've been missing meals, you've been like not dealing with obligations that you should be doing, like, or you're like, I don't want to work on myself, or I don't want to do this homework or this job assignment, so I'm going to plunge myself into fantasy and play a character that I like, that's like, has all the characteristics I like. I think it's when it stops you from looking after yourself or the people around you that you're supposed to, like, i.e. if you're a carer, if you have a pet, if you have a younger brother who for some reason doesn't know how to use an oven, so you have to cook for them, like, I think if it interrupts things, or like if it becomes, like when it starts becoming dangerous to your health or people around you.
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell, really. When it comes to hobbies, it's really important to make sure it remains escapism and doesn't become avoidance. And that's as true for me with anything, whether that's having a nap, one of my most favourite hobbies, or reading, or playing video games, or literally anything. It's when it becomes kind of all consuming. I would also say, like, in terms of playing with others, there are times when it gets heated because it's the nice thing about tabletop games is it's very easy to care about them, but then it's obviously by dint of the same thing, it's easy to care about them too much. So there have been a few times where around the table it's been like, okay, we've been playing this game now for 14 hours, and some games take forever, and tempers become a little frayed because people are just tired and they're a bit hangry maybe, or or maybe somebody did something or said something in a particular way a few turns ago, and those things can really escalate. And it's very important to know when those things are coming so you can stop and process them. Because the nice thing about tabletop games is you can process difficult things, but because you're putting yourself out there like that and you are getting invested, you also have a duty of care to yourself, really, to keep an eye on when you need to hit the pause button and go, okay, stop, we need to take ourselves fully out of this, fix what's going wrong, and act accordingly, because otherwise people just sort of get upset.
Yeah. Like, I think also when, like, if you're putting too much, like, if you're sort of like putting too many of your problems into like tabletop gaming, instead of you like dealing with them in a real life setting, because like sometimes like it's like the tabletop game might not be the time to tell Jerry across the table that that he slept with your wife. Like, sometimes like it's not the time to air that out, and it puts other people in uncomfortable situations. So it's like, I think it's also important not to it has to like remain fun at the end of the day, and it has to be fun and supportive for everyone who's there. Like, and it can't be about like someone's individual progress. It's about like the team, and and like you said about like tempers running high. Like, I think it's important if it gets too much, in either like if people are gonna fall out, or like you just need to take a little breather and be like, maybe let's come back to this next week and talk about what went wrong. I think like don't leave it. I think you need to address what goes wrong in the session, and then try and move forward, because you care about the people you're playing with, hopefully, and you want this to continue.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, a game is a game. It's not a replacement for therapy, and it's not the sole way you should be dealing with your problems, because actually it's a game. It's not designed for that. But saying that it can be used as a way to help you deal with things. And a lot of the time, we might not have access to clinical skills, and we might not have access to therapy, or we need something a bit more light-hearted to help us deal with our mental health. And I think that's where tabletop gaming comes in. And I think that's a good place to put a pause on the panel, because we've talked about some really important topics, and I hope that the viewers would have enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you if you've stuck this far. And I don't know, check Journey out on Dicebreaker, because he's the only one that does YouTube.
And I also say thank you so much to Veronica or Ronnie, however you want to address them, for hosting this. It's been an amazing experience.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot, and it's been really, really nice.
I'm really glad.